Another day in the office. The manager sat down with his employee, asking if she had any questions. He wanted to hear her thoughts on the workload, but she seemed terrified to speak up. She mumbled she had nothing to say, so he ended the meeting and scribbled on his notes. He mentioned that in 30 minutes, a new lab assistant named Shin Konu would arrive. He checked the file. He studied the photo and the resume. Shin Konu, top of his class in industrial design, first place in his internship rankings. The file noted 3 years of consistently high marks. A fast career climb seemed guaranteed. My boss wondered if those elite school recommendations actually meant anything. He decided to push those thoughts aside and focused on his work. He barely had time to think when a knock at the door broke the silence. The blond youth walked in, introducing himself as the new laboratory assistant. He sat across from Do Hyun. My boss greeted him, mentioning he had already reviewed his portfolio. He noted that despite the 3-year gap, he should fit in. Konu looked at Do Hyun with intense, strange focus. The manager paused, asking if the blonde had anything else to say. He invited him to speak freely. Konu simply asked if he truly didn't remember him. Do Hyun just frowned, stone-faced. The blonde said that he knew everything the second their eyes met. He sadly asked if Do Hyun really forgot. He whispered one name, Mocha. Do Hyun froze, his entire world tilting. A flood of childhood memories rushed back. Konu asked me to smell him, to remember the scent from back then. My boss dropped his pen, the past crashing into his present. I remember it clearly. The illegitimate son of a CEO, forced to live away after my mother died. A car accident left me orphaned, and I knew even then I was just a nuisance to that family. I was an outsider, unwanted. Then, my father brought home a puppy, and my loneliness finally faded. My stepbrother saw how happy that dog made me, and he was the type who hated seeing anyone else smile. He snatched the puppy away despite my screams. Do Kenjin didn't just take him, he destroyed him. I wasn't even allowed to bury him. I just visited the spot and cried until I was empty. I was so drowned in grief, I didn't want to live. Then, I felt something next to me. A boy crawled out from the bushes, slowly creeping closer. It was Shin Konu. The strangest part, he didn't walk. He crawled toward me on all fours, just like a dog. Every movement mirrored a pup. I caught myself thinking he actually looked like my lost Mocha. Konu lived in a small house near the garden, under the care of a manager who worked for my father. We became inseparable. I loved that my new friend was just as obedient and loyal as Mocha. I treated this gentle child like a pet. I loved his total compliance. We spent every moment together. Then, my father found out, and our friendship was ripped apart. That became the nightmare I fought to bury. After all these years, Do Hyun finally asked why he was here. He didn't wait for an answer, demanding to know if Konu was waiting for an apology. Konu shook his head. Instead, he told me that those days spent together were the happiest of his entire life. He admitted he had dreamed of returning to those years over and over. Do Hyun stayed silent, jaw tight. Konu confessed he wanted to work here and stay by my side. Then he leaned in, saying my scent hadn't changed at all. It still smelled like magnolias. Do Hyun slammed his hand on the desk, cutting off the words with a harsh strike. He growled that he was done listening to this nonsense. He asked if Konu was really going to keep playing these games. Konu looked confused. My boss barked that he wasn't that same child anymore. He was the department head now, and these kinds of jokes had no place in his office. Konu replied that he wasn't trying to be funny. Do Hyun demanded to know why he was acting this way. He ordered the assistant to follow the rules of decorum. Do Hyun had made his position clear. He finished by stating that the company had strict systems for rewarding only those who showed true professionalism. He will send that letter again, nothing changing. He cut the blonde off mid-sentence, ordering him off his lap. He lit a cigarette right there. He sat down, but the assistant lingered. Do Hyun snapped, asking if he really had something to say. Without waiting, the manager coldly told him to leave. The young employee bowed and hurried out. Left alone, the leader reached into his pocket, pulling out a bottle of cologne. Special stuff. It is how alphas mask their own pheromones. He stared at the bottle, his own anger simmering. Shin Konu's words about his scent lingering still haunted him. He remembered Shin Konu confessing he could smell it. He felt his scent mixing with his own omega pheromones. He sprayed the cologne, voice low and sharp. Frustration hit him. He was always unlucky. The workday ended, and he stopped by the door, watching the wet snow fall. He turned at a call. It was Shin Konu, offering his umbrella. The leader just scowled and stepped out into the cold. Suddenly, the snow stopped hitting him. He turned back. Do Hyun barked at the blonde, asking what the hell he was doing. Shin Konu just didn't want him to get wet. The leader told him it wasn't his business and ordered him off. He didn't budge. Do Hyun asked if he was deaf. Shin Konu silently took a step back. When the leader walked away, Shin Konu followed him, holding the umbrella over his head the entire time. He opened his car door and sat down, slamming it hard. Inside, Do Hyun let out a nervous, jagged breath. He was furious. Looking in the rearview mirror, he saw the guy still standing there, refusing to leave. He replayed their office conversation in his head. Do Hyun cursed under his breath. He started the engine and sped off. Shin Konu remained rooted to the spot, unmoving. He stood there until a colleague called out, asking why he was still lingering instead of heading home. She urged him to move, warning that if they waited, they would be stuck in a massive bus line. Once on the bus, she complained about the biting cold outside. She asked how the interview with Do Hyun went. She admitted that, for her, it was terrifying she couldn't even look him in the eye. Shin Konu was silent, lost in his own world, shocked that Do Hyun had truly forgotten those distant days. Shin Konu felt a sting of betrayal. He never forgot when he was small, when the flood destroyed their farm. His father found work as a handyman in a rich house. Then, behind the garden wall, he met a boy crying. He looked like an angel. Shin Konu could honestly say, that boy was the only one who smelled pleasant. Unlike the foul odors of the city, his scent was like white radiance. The crescent moon was far more captivating than any other fragrance. Shin Konu realized he had been obsessed with that boy's smell. Back then, the blonde child was mute and struggled to understand the world. But that sweet scent from the crying boy pulled him closer. Shin Konu acted on instinct. He really tried to comfort Do Hyun. His thoughts were cut short by the girl, who confessed that she hated how their leader was an alpha. She asked if he didn't think Do Hyun was a total jerk. Shin Konu thought back to his recent interaction. He didn't see a jerk. He saw someone lonely. The blonde asked her if he should try harder at work. Shin Konu asked if he was lacking professionally. The girl was indignant, calling that thought absurd. He kept thinking that things were different now, unlike when he was just an ignorant child. He wanted to give his all and be better. It wasn't a chore. He didn't want to lose this friend if fate had really brought them together again. Do Hyun met his father at a restaurant. Chairman Do Hyun congratulated his son and told him to sit. The father asked how work was going. The young man hesitated, wanting a drink first. The old man kept pushing. He asked if anything was bothering him. Do Hyun gave a cold, dry denial. The chairman said he could ask for help if needed. When his son rejected him, the chairman scowled. Then he added that Do Hyun had to be careful where he was placed, speaking with a firm, cold tone. If he just focused on his work, maybe his psyche would stabilize. The chairman thought sending him abroad for foreign experience would help his design career. He told his son to focus on results instead of showing weakness and getting hooked on drugs. He said it directly. He bragged that he had never touched drugs in his entire life. Furthermore, the father claimed he wouldn't be a real human and would just rot from his own mental disorders. He admitted he saw no future for his son. He had effectively written him off, angry that he didn't even care about his brothers. Do Hyun stayed silent, barely holding it together. The chairman sneered again, calling me pathetic, mocking my supposed weakness. He hated that I didn't have the iron psyche, he demanded. He never let up. He kept insisting that facing my problems head-on was the only way to be cured. Finally, I'd had enough. I cut him off, asking where he thought he was going. I shot back that if he wanted to fix me, maybe he should try beating some sense into himself instead. I smiled right at him, daring him to push me. I asked him exactly how long he planned on banging his own head against the wall. I challenged him, wondering who he thought he was, to lecture me about what I was searching for. Caught off guard by my defiance, the chairman shut down. He told me to stop talking and just be quiet and eat. He warned me that if I didn't appreciate such expensive food, luck would desert me. Once I was finally home, it all came back up. I couldn't keep dinner down. My stomach was in knots, and I stared at myself in the mirror, cursing the reflection looking back at me. After a cold shower, I reached for the bottle. There was some premium cognac left, and I was desperate to dull the edge. I poured glass after glass, gulping down the amber liquid, but the buzz never came. No matter how much I drank, I couldn't get drunk or find any escape. Everything is getting harder to handle. He never stops reminding me of my shameful, low-born origin. My own father, forcing me to call him uncle while he plays the role of my superior. I hate him and the suffocating hypocrisy he breathes. Still, the reality is that we're bound by blood. I don't fit into their alpha or omega labels, and the whole situation feels so absurd that it's become completely monotonous. I downed more cognac, but my mind stayed painfully clear. Everything happening now feels like a sick joke. I hate that he dictates my life, always breathing down my neck about my medication. I was reaching my breaking point, desperate to fall back into my old habits. The next morning, I dragged myself to the office, diving straight into work. My head was pounding, and my eyes felt like they were on fire. Maybe it was just exhaustion, or my eyes finally giving out. A knock on the door broke the silence, and I let the visitor in. It was that blonde lab assistant holding a cup of coffee. Shin Konu set the cup down without a word. Then he flashed a smile and urged me to drink it. I didn't say a thing. He spoke up again, claiming he'd made it himself, practically begging me to take a sip. My temper flared. I snapped at him, asking if he was bored and looking for toys to play with. I told him he couldn't just keep pacing in and out of my office. When he didn't apologize, I told him to get out. Instead, he asked if he could do this again tomorrow. I glared at him, asking if he really thought a manager's office was his personal kitchen where he could waltz in whenever he liked. He coolly replied he could come twice a day, or as often as I needed. He pushed back, insisting that this particular coffee blend was top tier. He even claimed he roasted the seeds himself before brewing it. I cut his explanation short and ordered him to leave right now. He didn't budge, instead asking me out for a joint dinner or at least to organize a department-wide meeting. I was livid, shouting for him to get the hell out of my office. Once he left, I was stuck alone with the steaming cup. I stared at the aroma for a moment, then walked over to the sink and dumped the whole thing down the drain. I caught myself being overly dramatic about it, but frankly, I thought that would keep him away for a while. But of course, things had to get even more complicated. The very next day, he showed up again with a tray full of food and drinks. I realized that if this kept up, I was going to lose my mind. I couldn't take it anymore and told him to cut the act. Shin Konu just played dumb, asking me with this fake innocence why I was so upset. I stared him down, asking if he was really going to pretend he didn't know what he was doing. Then I spelled it out. Stop bringing me food and coffee every single day. I told him the rest of the department would get the wrong idea and asked if he actually planned to feed the entire office staff. I told him it was creating a massive headache for me and asked why he kept wasting his time bringing me food when he knew for a fact I was just going to toss it. He answered that. He knew I hated the break room coffee because it was garbage, so he brewed this special blend just for me. I told him for the last time I wasn't drinking it. He just shrugged and said he'd leave the refreshments in my office anyway. I watched him walk away and thought I'd finally managed to escape his nonsense. It was time for lunch, so I got up. I told myself that no matter who showed up, I wasn't letting anyone bother me today. I was going to do my own thing and ignore everyone. But in the hallway, I ran straight into Shin Konu, holding a stack of papers. I walked right past him, giving him the cold shoulder. He called out, asking if I was headed to lunch and offering to grab sushi. I kept walking in silence. He followed me, trying to block my path. I finally hit my limit, whipped around, and barked, asking him what the hell he wanted from me. He just held up his file and said he'd prep some options for the company dinner. The managers debated the 5 venue options, but Do Hyun didn't care where it happened. He shoved his credit card toward the blonde, telling him to cover the dinner tab. Shin Konu tried to refuse, insisting he wasn't going, and asked how to back out properly. They argued about the first dinner appointment, but Do Hyun cut him off with a dry tone. He didn't care about the food at all. Unlike the others, Shin Konu actually looked crushed. Do Hyun ducked outside for a smoke, eating with other people. It sounded completely exhausting. Even as a kid, his step-siblings had made mealtime a nightmare, mocking his every move. They obsessed over his chopstick technique, making him so nervous he'd drop food looking like a mess. That trauma stuck. Now, eating with anyone just made his skin crawl with pure disgust. He decided that if people can't respect personal habits, it's better to just eat alone. No point dwelling on it. I checked the time I needed to get moving, or I'd be late. A team conversation caught my ear. Of course, all eyes were locked on Shin Konu. Our gazes collided for a second. I looked away fast, refusing to show even a flicker of interest. With the whole street between us, I just headed for the elevator, trying to ignore him. At the last second, that blonde kid slipped inside and greeted me. My stomach turned instantly. Stalker vibes, seriously. I told myself to just endure it, stay silent, and shut him out. I bolted for my car in the parking lot, only to notice him heading for the same spot. Does that fancy car really belong to an assistant? Where did he get that kind of money? I thought he grew up broke. Wait, why am I even thinking about this? I have real work to do. I jumped in, started the engine, and took off. But a second later, I realized he was tailing me. My nerves started to fray. He actually had the guts to overtake me. Furious, I cursed and slammed the gas pedal down. I wanted to lose him. When we finally stopped, I was ready to let him have it. I stormed over to his car and pounded on the window. He opened it, looking far too calm. My pulse was racing. I demanded to know why he was following me. Just leave me alone. Shin Konu started stammering apologies, insisting he actually had a meeting right here. Talk about embarrassing. I had completely misread the entire situation. He asked where I was headed, and I told him the large conference room, the 13th floor. He casually pointed out that I was in the wrong building entirely. He even offered to show me the way. When we arrived, he finally said goodbye and left. I couldn't believe it. He'd actually just helped me out and gone on his way. I shook off the weird vibe and headed inside. But then someone called my name, Jong Chang-soo. He was grinning from ear to ear, looking just as loud as ever. He teased that I hadn't aged a bit. 6 years ago, when I was working abroad, we used to work as bartenders together. Seeing him now was a total shock. Back then, he was the son of a politician, living the high life abroad. We got close, closer than just friends, if you catch my drift. He was my source for, let's say, recreational substances. We lost touch when I moved to Canada. He explained he was here as the marketing manager today. Then he asked if I was here for design. I didn't get why he was playing dumb, but he just smirked and said he was curious. Before I could respond, the presentation kicked off, ending our little reunion. Once the flagship conference wrapped up, I packed my gear to head back to the office. Chang-soo chased me down, and with a sly look, asked what I was doing Friday. He didn't even wait for a yes, just pushed for drinks, saying it'd been way too long. Do Hyun stood his ground. He wasn't going anywhere. Shootin smirked, telling him not to rush, hinting that Do Hyun was far too boring and needed some real fun. Jong Chang-soo stretched out, sliding his business card over with a grin. "Call him," he said, "once you're mature enough to know what you really want." The brunette frowned, hesitating for a heartbeat before his hand shot out to snatch the card away. The deputy called out that he was available any time, but Do Hyun was already speeding off in his car. His mind raced back to Shouten's words and that specific, damning gesture Chang-soo always made whenever the topic of drugs came up. It still didn't feel real that the deputy's son was actually working here, right alongside their own dark, illegal history. Back at the office, the leader summoned everyone, barking orders for the whole team to gather in the conference room immediately. He had details on the new flagship project to drop. Once the room was packed, Do Hyun launched into his presentation. He pointed out that they were ahead of last year's schedule, warning that this aggressive timeline would likely shake things up. Internal competition was bound to shift. Do Hyun announced they'd start the new concept tomorrow, eyes scanning the room to ensure everyone was locked in. The workload wasn't actually that heavy, he assured them, making it clear that pulling this off was well within their reach. Then he dropped the bombshell. Since this is a premium model, he's taking the lead himself. If anyone wanted a spot in the internal competition, they needed to email him a formal request. And if no one volunteered, he'd be forced to handpick the manager himself. He made it clear that joining the project wouldn't be a golden ticket, but it wouldn't hurt them either. Being on the team didn't guarantee special favors, but at least there wouldn't be any professional fallout for stepping up. He set the deadline. By the end of the day, everyone needed to decide and get their answer to him. The meeting broke up, but the whispers started immediately as groups debated whether to even bother applying. Some complained it was just too much hassle, convinced the competition was rigged from the start anyway. Many decided to sit it out, assuming the elite first team would just snag the flagship project like they always did. They hated how the project teams were basically a closed club for the veterans. Then, someone hit the real issue. They whispered that the project was doomed because their lead was too young and inexperienced. That's how they saw Do Hyun, and it was their perfect excuse to quit. Do Hyun stayed late, brooding as the day ended, disappointed by the lack of enthusiasm from his team. Only 2 people had signed up, and Shin Konu was one of them. Do Hyun felt his gut tighten. He needed this project to thrive. He needed 4 people, but the pickings were slim. Worse, he desperately wanted to keep Shin Konu at arm's length. Still, as a manager, he couldn't just boot him without a reason. Besides, the guy had the stats to back it up. Shin Konu was consistently in the top 3 for performance. Do Hyun sighed, thinking that if their past wasn't so complicated, this might actually work. Maybe, just maybe, he thought. This could be a turning point. Do Hyun didn't rule out that this project could finally establish a clear, professional boundary between them. The next day, a knock echoed through his office. He called out, and in walked the blonde Shin Konu. The boy asked why he'd been summoned. Do Hyun confirmed it and gestured for him to take a seat. Shin Konu obeyed, sitting right across from him. The brunette took a breath, getting straight to the point. He mentioned the email from last night. Shin Konu didn't blink, confirming he was serious about wanting to contribute to the project. Do Hyun pressed him, asking if he was just doing this for him personally, given their complicated history as leader and subordinate. He openly questioned if Shin Konu really belonged on his team, voicing every doubt he had about the boy's motives. Even under the pressure, the blonde stayed composed, but the leader didn't hold back his honest thoughts. He told him that he trusted his skills to separate business from their personal mess, but he had conditions. He brought up those inappropriate, childhood-tinged comments from the interview, calling them completely out of line. He didn't know if he was making a mistake, especially with the way the blonde kept showing up with unwanted coffee. It was pointless, he snapped. He told Shin Konu that, frankly, he didn't see the boy as someone capable of learning. Do Hyun insisted he only worked with competent people who knew how to get the job done. If this was just about the past, if he couldn't separate his personal feelings from the work, he was off the team, period. The blonde nodded. He promised to follow every instruction to the letter. With that, their meeting was over, and Do Hyun dismissed him. Left alone, Do Hyun hoped the boy would actually listen and keep his head down, but it was hard to be sure. He couldn't help but wonder if Shin Konu could really pull his weight. Work wrapped up, but Do Hyun stayed, staring at his screen. He checked the attendance log, seeing who'd stayed late and who hadn't, and let out a frustrated curse. The manager was certain of it now. Shin Konu was practically non-human. Do Hyun started planning his next move. Getting an office desk is impossible, yet Shin had it all perfectly organized. The manager noticed the speed of his work, which was unreal. During their entire time together, everything was flawless. Even now, the blonde stayed late, grinding away on an extra project. I truly wondered if Shin Konu was okay. How could he handle such a massive workload without burning out? Was he seriously still at his desk? The manager stepped out, curious to see how things were going. Shin Konu turned, looking at his boss, holding a glass of hot water, meant to soothe his tired colleague. He accepted the drink with a thank you. Do Hyun glanced over at the screen, asking if he had started the modeling work. Shin confirmed, mentioning an important meeting tomorrow. So, he was getting a head start. The manager pointed at an indicator, asking why he rounded the corners. Shouldn't the design follow a specific line? Shin adjusted it exactly as suggested. Do Hyun asked how he felt about it. Shin looked satisfied, saying he liked it much better. The manager stated dryly that he didn't expect such a formal reply. The blonde insisted it wasn't formal at all, adding that the new design was truly elegant. He even claimed everyone would agree it was better than before. Then Shin leaned in, telling him he wanted to be honest. He admitted he absolutely loved the wireless headphones he had just developed. He went on about how smooth the construction was, especially the cover. The whole model was so meticulously thought out. It felt as solid as marble. I told him that kind of flattery was unnecessary and that I didn't care for it. With that, I ordered Shin Konu to stop rushing and head home. His workday was officially over. I walked toward the elevator. But at the very last second, the doors slid open, and there he was again, Shin Konu. He tried to invite me to dinner. My mood instantly soured. I told him to listen closely and asked why he was still hovering around me. He kept pushing these conversations. I demanded to know if he was making a mistake. The blonde immediately began apologizing. He tried to explain he was just starving, so hungry his head was spinning, and he couldn't control himself. Moments later, I realized he hadn't even eaten lunch because of his business trip. Shin couldn't help it and shed a tiny tear. He insisted that since he had nothing left to eat, he'd likely stay hungry. He begged me one more time to join him. Shin Konu knew exactly what he was doing. He watched me closely, realizing I always acted soft toward anyone with children. He noticed I had a separate, gentler side. I just couldn't stay indifferent. Whenever someone brought in homemade cakes or cookies, I would always sneak a small piece. Shin even managed to catch a rare smile from me, something that practically never happens. I found myself looking at the photo of a child on his phone screen. Why was I trying so hard to keep my guard up? I still refused to go to dinner with him. So, the blonde decided that if he acted pitiful enough, his boss would eventually crumble. I asked him, was he really a baby who needed someone to hold his hand? Couldn't he eat by himself? The blonde apologized again, claiming he was so dizzy he didn't know what he was saying. I didn't know how to handle this, so I finally gave in to his persistence. I sighed and told him fine. We were going to dinner.